Welcome students. We now come to the concept of notation of a vector. Well, as we have already learned that vector has both a magnitude and a direction and it follows vector algebra. Now the notation of a vector will include the fact that whenever I have to draw a particular vector, say I am given an example here, I have to draw a force of 10 Newton due east. So this is my task and I have to draw it accordingly the rules of notation. So as you come to the rules of notation, you also come to the discussion that how you need to think about a vector. The first thing that you need to know about a vector is the choice of axis. And the axis, as you know, is a right-hand orthogonal system which consists of three axes x, y and z. So the first thing that we have to deal with a vector is to choose the proper axis. Now an axis, as you have seen, that this name of the axis is a right-hand orthogonal system which consists of three axis directions x, y and z. Now the second thing that we need to do here is to have a choice of the origin. So what you do is you plot x and y like this and you choose a origin here. Say the origin is the point of intersection of the two axes x and y. Now after having this origin, what you need to do is to choose a scale. Now what do you mean by a scale? We mean by a scale by saying the fact that say I consider 1 Newton as 1 meter. So when I replace it by or I represent it 10 Newton, I have to draw a line of 10 meter. Now see, this choice is not proper. So what we do is we choose a proper scale, which is very important here. Say for example, I choose that 1 Newton is 1 centimeter. So now if I have to draw 10 Newton, I have to draw a line of 10 centimeter. So I start from here and I draw a line of 10 centimeter, which is OA. Now the vector can be represented in two ways. Either it can be represented by arrow in the middle here, or it can be given an arrow at the what we call a head here. So this origin is now called a tail of a vector and this end point is now called a head of a vector. So this direction, either you put it in the middle or you put it at the head. It is absolutely your choice, but please don't do both of them. So now we come to the representation finally, that we say that the vector we draw is something like this. Now what we have to do, we have to know the representation of what we called unit vector. Now the representation of a unit vector, before going to that, we need to know that it has a magnitude of unity. So the unity is the magnitude of a unit vector. Now what about the direction? We have made it clear that everything along x-axis should be given by a vector called I cap. Anything along y-axis should be given by j cap. And anything along z-axis should be given by a vector called k cap. All these have a magnitude of 1. So when we impart a particular unit vector, we impart a sense of direction to it. Now a unit vector, when we represent a vector, it has two components. One is the magnitude or the mod value, simply the r, and the unit vector is represented by this letter called r cap or r hat. So it is either cap or hat, whatever you call it. Now say for example, when I have a choice of my unit vector of I, j and k, this force of 10 Newton due east, as you can see, east is directed along the positive direction of x-axis. So if I plot east, west, north, south, I have this as plus I have west as minus I have north as plus j, and I have south as minus j. And vertically up, if you go vertically up, it is plus k, that is along the z, and if you go downward, then it is minus k, that is negative of z. So this is a notation which we have to very importantly follow. And I have found many students who tend to consider the north as k, which is absolutely not. North is always given by the y-axis or j. So now our force of 10 Newton due east is nothing but 10 I Newton. So this this is the beauty of I, as I have told you, or the significance of a unit vector, you may say in technical terms, is the fact that when you impart this or when you add this value gets the direction. And now everybody knows that the moment I put I, it is clear that it is moving along the positive direction of x-axis. So that is how students we deal with the notation. And one more thing, or one more thing of caution about the direction is the fact that if I have any direction along this, along this, along this, along this, and if I represent the force, then I will write it F, and I will have a arrowhead from left to right to indicate the vector. Now this arrowhead has nothing to do with the direction, so here the force is also denoted by this notation. Here the force is also denoted by this notation, and here the force is also denoted by this notation. So I have seen many students who tend to show that a force along this axis is shown like this, again on this axis they are tending to drawing like this, but it is completely wrong notion. This sense of direction has nothing to do with the direction of the particular force. So in every case of vector, you draw the notation always from left to right. And again, I ask you to remember about the notation of tail and head. Mind you, tail is the origin and head is the end point of the vector. I have found many students again mixing up this tail and head. So this tail and head or terminus, whatever you call it, the head is also called the terminus and the tail is called an origin. So you must remember, because in many cases you will be asked that a tail is rotated or a head is rotated. So you have to know that about which direction the vector rotates. So when the tail of this vector rotates, it goes on like this, it goes on like this, it goes on like this, like this, like this, and it may come back to the original position. So this is how the rotation of vector or whatever you call it is involved, again with the fundamental of notation. Now the notation is, that is why very important for a vector. So I will put the whole thing in a nutshell again, that in notation primarily use unit vectors I, j and k, which are predetermined in direction, and then we add a particular value to that one which gives a sense of direction. So that is all about right now on notation. Thank you very much. For testing your understanding of this lesson and more videos, log on to www.tubelessons.net.